The guest room's silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft ticking of a clock on the nightstand. Jungkook sat cross-legged on the massive bed, his phone clutched in his hands like a lifeline. The estate's grandeur, its marble halls, its endless rooms, felt like a cage, keeping him from the world he knew. He'd promised his mothers and Junghan he'd call, but the weight of Taehyung's security protocols and the morning's meeting with the legal team made even this simple act feel fraught with risk. He glanced at the door, half expecting Ms. Lee or one of Taehyung's staff to barge in, but the room remained still. Taking a deep breath, he dialed Junghan's number, his heart pounding as the line rang. When his brother's voice came through, bright and familiar, Jungkook felt a pang of relief so sharp it hurt. Hyung. Finally Junghan's voice crackled with energy, though there was an edge of worry beneath it. Where are you? Mom's been asking, and you're being all mysterious. Jungkook forced a laugh, leaning back against the headboard. I'm at a work thing. It's complicated, but I'm okay. How's Mom? She's stable, Junghan said, his tone softening. I had a good day, actually. She was up for a bit, talking about you. Said you're probably overworking yourself. Jungkook's throat tightened, the image of his mother's frail smile flashing in his mind. Yeah, sounds like her. Can I talk to her? There was a rustle. Then Sujin's voice came through, weaker but warm. Cookie, you're worrying me. Where are you? Junghan says you're not at the cafe. Jungkook closed his eyes, the lie heavy on his tongue. I'm on a job out of town. It's temporary, but it pays well. I'll be back soon, I promise. Sujin was quiet for a moment, her maternal instincts cutting through the distance. You sound tired, she said softly. Whatever this job is, don't let it take too much from you. We need you, not just your money. The words stung, echoing the doubts Jungkook had been pushing down. I know, Mom, he whispered. I'm doing this for us. I love you too, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Be careful, okay? As Junghan took the phone back, chattering about school and his latest art project, Jungkook's gaze drifted to the window, the estate's dark garden stretching into the night. He was so focused on keeping his voice steady that he didn't hear the door open until a shadow fell across the room. Taehyung stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hallway's dim light. He wore a simple black shirt and slacks, but his presence was as commanding as ever, his dark eyes locked on Jungkook with an intensity that made his breath catch. Jungkook quickly muttered a goodbye to Junghan and ended the call, his heart racing. I didn't hear you knock, Jungkook said, his voice sharper than he intended as he set the phone down. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. I didn't, he said, his tone calm but unapologetic. You were distracted, Jungkook bristled, standing from the bed, his hands shoved in his pockets. So you just walk in? What if I was? I don't know, changing. Taehyung's lips twitched, a rare flicker of amusement crossing his face. Then I'd have seen something interesting. The words were teasing, but his gaze was serious, studying Jungkook like he was trying to unravel a mystery. Jungkook's cheeks flushed, and he looked away, unnerved by the spark of warmth in Taehyung's tone. What do you want? He asked, his voice quieter now. I'm following your rules. I signed your papers. Taehyung didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the gardens. The firelight from the study was gone, but the room felt warmer with him in it, the air charged with something unspoken. Your family, he said finally, his voice low. "There, why you're doing this?" Jungkook nodded, though Taehyung wasn't looking at him. "Yeah. My mom's sick. My brother's still in school. They need me." Taehyung turned, his eyes softer than Jungkook had ever seen them, though still guarded. "I had a family once," he said, the words so quiet they were almost lost in the room's silence. "They made choices I didn't understand. Choices that cost me." Jungkook's breath caught, the confession catching him off guard. It was the most personal thing Taehyung had ever shared, a crack in the billionaire's armor that felt like a gift in a burden. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle, afraid to push too far. Taehyung's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Jungkook thought he wouldn't answer. "They chose power over loyalty," he said finally, his voice hard but tinged with something raw. "I learned not to trust easily." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jungkook wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of Taehyung's past, but the billionaire's expression warned him not to press. Instead, he said, "I'm not like that. I'm here because I have to be, not because I want your power." Taehyung's gaze locked onto his, intense and searching. "I know," he said, his voice low, almost tender. "That's why you're still here." Jungkook's heart raced, the air between them thickening with something electric. Taehyung took a step closer, close enough that Jungkook could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the weight of a man carrying too much. "You're not just a contract, Jian," Taehyung said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore." The word sent a shiver through Jungkook, a mix of fear and longing he couldn't untangle. He opened his mouth to respond, but Taehyung stepped back, the moment breaking as quickly as it had formed. "Get some sleep," he said, his tone reverting to command. "Tomorrow, we deal with the leak." As Taehyung left, the door clicking shut behind him, Jungkook sank back onto the bed, his mind reeling. Taehyung's confession, his closeness, his words, "not anymore," echoed in his head, stirring something reckless in his chest. He was in deeper than ever, caught in a world of secrets and stakes he barely understood. But for the first time, he felt like Taehyung saw him, not as a mistake, but as someone who mattered. The estate's security room was a stark contrast to its opulent halls, all cold steel and glowing monitors that cast an eerie blue light across the space. Jungkook stood near the door, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, feeling like an intruder in a world of calculated power. Taehyung had insisted he be present for this meeting, though Jungkook wasn't sure why, maybe to prove a point, or maybe to keep him close after Minyoung's unsettling visit. Either way, the air was thick with tension, and Jungkook's nerves were frayed from lack of sleep and the constant pull of Taehyung's orbit. Taehyung stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding even among the half-dozen security personnel and advisors hunched over laptops and tablets. His black suit was impeccable, but his expression was a storm, eyes narrowed, jaw set, every line of him radiating control. A man in a grey blazer, introduced as Park Jimin, Taehyung's head of security, was briefing him on the leak. "We've traced the breach to an internal source at the surrogacy agency," Jimin said, his voice clipped as he tapped a tablet, pulling up a grainy photo of a woman Jungkook vaguely recognized from his first meeting at the agency. She sold details to a third party linked to Minyoung's network. "We're still digging into who's pulling the strings." Taehyung's gaze was fixed on the screen, his fingers drumming lightly on the edge of a console. "Find her," he said, his voice low and dangerous. and find out how much they know. I want names, motives, everything. Jimin nodded, but his eyes flicked to Jungkook, a silent question in his glance. What about him? He asked, his tone neutral but pointed. The leak's already out there. His involvement makes him a liability. Jungkook's stomach twisted, his hands tightening on his arms. He opened his mouth to protest, but Taehyung's voice cut through the room like a blade. He's not a liability, he said, his tone final, his eyes never leaving the screen. He's under my protection. Anyone who goes near him answers to me. The room went silent, the weight of Taehyung's words settling over everyone. Jungkook's heart raced, a mix of gratitude and unease swirling in his chest. Taehyung's protectiveness was fierce, almost possessive, but it left Jungkook feeling both safe and trapped. Jimin raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Understood. We're tightening security around the estate and his family. No one gets in or out without clearance. Taehyung finally turned, his gaze locking onto Jungkook, who stood frozen by the door. You hear that, Jian? He said, his voice softer now but no less commanding. You're safe here. But you need to trust me. Jungkook's throat tightened, the intensity of Taehyung's stare making the room feel smaller. I do, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. But I don't like being kept in the dark. If I'm a target, I need to know why. Who's behind this? Taehyung's expression flickered, a rare crack in his control. He crossed the room in a few strides, stopping just close enough for Jungkook to feel the heat of his presence. You want answers, he said, his voice low, meant for Jungkook alone. Then understand this, my enemies don't play fair. They want my company, my legacy, and they'll use you to get it. That's all you need to know for now. Jungkook's jaw clenched, his defiance flaring despite the fear curling in his gut. That's not enough, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I'm not just some piece in your game, Taehyung. I'm risking everything for this, for you. I deserve more. The room seemed to hold its breath, Jimin and the others glancing away, pretending not to notice the tension crackling between them. Taehyung's eyes narrowed, but there was something else in them, respect, maybe, or something deeper. You're not a piece, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're more than that. The words hit Jungkook like a current, stirring something reckless in his chest. He wanted to push, to demand what Taehyung meant, but the billionaire's gaze held him in place, a storm of emotions Jungkook couldn't unravel. Before he could speak, Jimin cleared his throat, breaking the moment. We've got a lead on Yoongi's contact, Jimin said, his tone brisk. I'll have a report by tonight. Taehyung nodded, stepping back, his demeanor shifting back to cold efficiency. Good. Keep me updated. He glanced at Jungkook, his expression unreadable. We're done here. Ms. Lee will take you back to your room. As Jungkook followed Ms. Lee out, his mind raced, replaying Taehyung's words. You're more than that. They echoed the confession from the night before, each one peeling back another layer of the billionaire's guarded heart. But the reality of the leak, the danger, and Taehyung's ruthless control loomed larger than ever. Jungkook was no longer just a surrogate, he was a target, a key, and maybe something more to the man who held his world together, and threatened to tear it apart. As he reached his room, Jungkook's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stay sharp. I'm watching. Message sent a shiver through him, a reminder that Taehyung's protection came with a price. But as he sank onto the bed, the billionaire's voice lingered in his mind. and Jungkook couldn't shake the feeling that he was falling deeper into a storm he might not want to escape.